A Vargas family hope. The pre-dawn gloom, seeping through the greasy windowpane, cast the cramped Vargas apartment in a monochrome palette. Elias stirred, careful not to rouse Maria and Mateo, his younger siblings, who were entwined in a narrow bed that sat adjacent to his own thin cot. A thick cloud of stale tortillas and simmering beans permeated the air, a constant olfactory reminder of their threadbare existence. That he raked fingers through his tousled dark hair, finding a meager comfort in the rough weave of the wool blanket against his skin. Today was the day he turned the page. He eased out of bed, the aged floorboards protesting beneath his weight. His father had already vanished, swallowed by the docks, where another brutal day of cargo unloading awaited. In the cramped kitchenette, Elena, his mother, crooned softly as she stirred a pot upon the antiquated gas stove. The rhythmic chime of spoon against metal formed a familiar, almost primal, symphony of their lives. "Buenos dias, mi hijo," she greeted him, her voice imbued with a warmth tinged with weariness, yet, her smile possessed a luminosity that banished the encroaching shadows. "Buenos dias, mama." Elias kissed her cheek, inhaling the faint aroma of wood smoke clinging to her shawl, worn soft with age. He snagged a cold arepa from a stack, its coarse texture a stark greeting to his palate. He located the Omnicorp employee manual resting on the wobbly table, its pristine cover a jarring contrast to the chipped paint and peeling wallpaper. He scanned the pages, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Punctuality, absolute, performance, above expectations, he mouthed silently, the pronouncements blurred before his eyes, magnified by the towering weight of his family's aspirations. In his mind's eye, he conjured up the sprawling Omnicorp campus, a futuristic mirage of gleaming steel and shimmering glass, worlds removed from their humble barrio. He, Elias Vargas, a man armed only with a rudimentary education and a history of menial labor, was now a part of it. A mere custodian, a nearly invisible spoke in a colossal machine, but a beginning nonetheless. He snapped the manual shut, a knot of nerves tightening in his gut. Success wasn't optional. It was a necessity. Elena slid a steaming mug of coffee toward him. "Elias," she said, her hand briefly covering his, "this job. It's more than just employment. It is a gift, an answered prayer." He gazed up at her, noticing the delicate web of wrinkles around her eyes, the fatigue that contradicted her hopeful tone. "I know, Mama, that I'll prove worthy." "You always do, mijo," she replied, her voice thick with unshed tears. "However, this carries more weight. This holds the promise of a brighter future for all of us." Maria dreams of a surgeon's steady hand, Mateo yearns for an architect's eye. This breathes life into those dreams. He squeezed her hand, the hardened calluses a testament to her unending toil. "I promise, Mama. My efforts will exceed all that came before. I will do everything within my power." He drained his coffee, the bitter brew searing its path. He straightened his best shirt, a faded blue button-down reserved for significant occasions. A touch snug across the shoulders, showing somewhere at the collar. It was, nevertheless, the finest he possessed. Stepping onto the street as the first fingers of dawn reached across the horizon, Elias inhaled deeply. The morning air, cool and invigorating, whispered of a new beginning. He gripped the employee manual tightly, a paper-thin bulwark against the uncertainties looming ahead. Not just a job, but a lifeline, a chance to rise, a Vargas family creed to uphold. Roadside assistance. Elias sprinted, backpack bouncing against his spine, the humid Louisiana air thick in his lungs. He was already 10 minutes late. Mr. Henderson had emphasized punctuality, drilled it into him during the brief interview. Miss this bus and he'd be walking, ensuring a disastrous first impression. He risked a glance over his shoulder, willing the lumbering bus into view. Nothing. Sweat plastered his shirt to his back, a roadmap of his anxiety. He pushed harder, rounding the bend, and almost collided with it. The bus wheezed to a halt, its door hissing open like a disapproving serpent. Elias scrambled aboard, offering a breathless apology to the driver, who merely grunted in response. He found a seat near the back, heart hammering against his ribs. He had to make a good impression. He desperately needed this job. Barely 10 minutes into the ride, the bus lurched violently, throwing Elias forward. A collective groan rippled through the passengers. The driver cursed under his breath, muttering something about idiots. Looking out the window, Elias saw the problem, a boxy delivery truck, half submerged in the muddy ditch alongside the road. Its back wheels spun uselessly, spraying mud across the already grimy asphalt. A man, dressed in surprisingly crisp khaki pants and a plain gray t-shirt, stood beside the truck, hands jammed into his pockets, radiating an aura of profound frustration that he looked like someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Most of the passengers resumed their earlier activities, resigned to the delay. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling he should do something. That he remembered his abuelo, always stopping to help stranded motorists, tools gleaming in the back of his battered pickup. "Excuse me," Elias said, squeezing past knees and bags. "Gotta stretch my legs." He hopped off the bus, the driver shooting him a dubious look. As he approached the truck, the man in khaki turned, his face tight. Up close, he looked older than Elias had initially thought, lines etched around his eyes. "Problem?" Elias asked, already sizing up the situation. The man sighed, the sound laced with exasperation. "Problem is, I'm stuck, and I have a delivery of artisanal dog biscuits that are going to melt into a sugary mess if I don't get this thing out soon." He didn't sound particularly concerned about the dog biscuits. Elias grinned. "Artisanal dog biscuits, huh, sounds important." He crouched down, examining the wheels and the angle of the ditch. "Got any wood in the back?" The man raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "As a matter of fact, I do, for bracing shipments." "Perfect." Elias stood, dusting his hands on his jeans. "Let's get you out of there, Mr. Sterling," the man said, a slight hesitation in his voice. "Mr. Sterling." Elias, with Mr. Sterling watching, directed the man to position the wooden plank strategically under the spinning tires. That he then started pushing against the back of the truck, straining with every muscle. Mud splattered his clothes, clinging to his skin. That he felt the give, a slight shift. That he pushed harder, grunting with effort. "A little more on your end, Mr. Sterling," he yelled. With a final surge, the truck lurched free, its tires finding purchase on the road. Elias stumbled back, breathless, covered in mud, but grinning. Mr. Sterling stared at the truck, then at Elias, a strange expression on his face. "Well," he said, after a moment. "I appreciate that, really, thank you." Elias shrugged, wiping mud from his forehead. "No problem, just glad I could help." He glanced back at the bus, already pulling away. "Shoot." Mr. Sterling followed his gaze. "Need a ride?" He reached into his pocket. "Trial by fire." The stale air of the Omnicorp loading dock slammed into Elias like a physical blow. He was late. 5 minutes, according to the unforgiving clock above the entrance, but enough to earn him the withering glare of Mr. Harding. The man stood like a granite statue, his arms crossed, his jowls trembling slightly with suppressed rage. "Vargas!" Harding barked, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "Care to explain your tardiness?" Elias swallowed, his carefully rehearsed apology dissolving on his tongue. "Sir, I missed the bus. I'm really sorry, it won't happen again." Harding's lip curled. "Excuses are like, well, they're everywhere. You're already behind, Vargas. Let's see if you're worth the space you occupy." He gestured to a mountain of crates stacked precariously high. "Unload those, inventory them, and get them organized, and do it fast. The truck leaves in 3 hours." Elias's heart sank. The crates were labeled, industrial-grade polymers, hazardous. He'd never handled anything like that before. He stammered, "Sir, I haven't been trained on." Harding cut him off, "Learn on the job. That's what separates the wheat from the chaff, Vargas, now move." The next 3 hours were a blur of aching muscles and mounting panic. Each crate weighed a ton, or at least felt like it. The air grew thick with the smell of chemical solvents, stinging Elias's nostrils. His back screamed in protest, and sweat plastered his shirt to his skin. He fumbled with the scanner, repeatedly misreading the bar codes. Just when he thought he couldn't lift another crate, a voice, soft but firm, cut through the cacophony of the warehouse. "Hey, Vargas, take a breather." He turned to see a woman, her dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, her eyes assessing him with a mixture of pity and amusement. She wore the same drab blue uniform as everyone else, but her movements were economical, efficient. She held a clipboard in one hand and a box cutter in the other. "Maria Rodriguez," she said, extending a hand calloused from years of hard labor, "you look like you're about to collapse." Elias wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime across his forehead. I don't know what I'm doing. Mr. Harding just dumped this on me. Maria nodded, her gaze flicking towards Harding, who was observing them from across the warehouse. He likes to break in the new guys, especially the ones who show up late. She lowered her voice. Here's a trick, use the hand truck for the bottom crates, stack them in groups of 5 near the scanner. It'll save you some steps, and make sure you double check those codes. Harding will jump at any mistake. She pointed to a lever on the scanner. Switch it to manual input. It's faster if the barcode is smudged. Elias felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with gratitude. I really appreciate it. Maria shrugged. We all need a little help sometimes, just pay it forward. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. And Vargas, don't let him get to you. He's just an old windbag. Then, with a wink, she turned and disappeared back into the labyrinth of crates, leaving Elias feeling a little less alone, a little less overwhelmed. He picked up the hand truck, adjusted his grip, and attacked the mountain of crates with renewed determination. He still had a long way to go, but now he had a fighting chance. Undercover boss. The pre-dawn air bit at Alistair's cheeks as he wrestled the delivery van into gear. Mr. Sterling, he muttered to himself, tasting the unfamiliar name, feeling its hollowness. He was a ghost in his own machine, a phantom observing the gears of Thorn Logistics from the inside. The route was a brutal ballet of tight deadlines and heavier-than-advertised boxes. He watched the drivers, their faces etched with exhaustion even before the sun had fully risen, navigating the labyrinthine city streets. With a practiced weariness. He saw the logistical choke points, the inefficiencies that bled time and morale. He pulled into the warehouse loading bay, the air thick with diesel fumes and the metallic clang of machinery. Mr. Harding, the warehouse foreman, was already there, a squat figure radiating barely suppressed rage. Harding's voice, a gravelly rasp, cut through the morning din. Vargas, you call that stacking? You're gonna have half the inventory on the floor, you clumsy idiot. Alistair watched as a young man, barely more than a boy, struggled to secure a teetering stack of boxes. Elias Vargas, his name tag read. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead. He looked utterly overwhelmed. Sorry, Mr. Harding, Elias mumbled, his voice barely audible. I'm trying my best. Trying isn't good enough, Vargas. We don't pay you to try, we pay you to do. Now get it right, or you're out on your ear. Harding's face was mottled, spittle flying. He circled Elias like a predator, his words a relentless assault. Alistair felt a surge of anger, a visceral reaction he hadn't anticipated. He wanted to intervene, to tell Harding to back off, to offer Elias a hand, but Mr. Sterling was supposed to be just another driver, oblivious, indifferent. He clenched his fists, the keys digging into his palm. He saw a flicker of something in Elias's eyes, not fear, but a stubborn determination. Elias straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and started rearranging the boxes, his movements now deliberate, focused. He worked in silence, ignoring Harding's continued berating, his jaw tight with resolve. Later, during his break, Alistair sat alone in the cab of the van, the engine ticking softly. He stared out at the grimy landscape, a knot forming in his stomach. The company's glossy brochures touted its commitment to employee well-being and fair labor practices. He'd even signed off on the text himself. He thought of Elias, his quiet dignity in the face of Harding's abuse, and the gulf between those words and the reality he was witnessing felt vast and unbridgeable. It was more than just inefficiency, it was a rot, a sickness spreading through the very foundations of Thorn Logistics. He had come here seeking answers, seeking a way to improve the company. He hadn't expected to find such blatant cruelty. The experience left a sour taste in his mouth. He knew then that this undercover boss experiment wasn't just about streamlining processes, it was about something far more fundamental, about the human cost of success, and he, Alistair Thorn, was going to have to pay that cost, one way or another. Whispers of discontent. Alistair, disguised in a simple Omnicorp uniform that felt strangely alien, leaned against a stack of labeled crates. The air, thick with the scent of cardboard and machine oil, scratched at his throat. He watched Elias struggle to maneuver a pallet jack laden with boxes. Harding, his face a roadmap of permanent disapproval, barked instructions that sounded more like reprimands. This, Alistair thought grimly, was precisely what the spreadsheets failed to capture. He approached Elias during a rare lull. Rough day? He asked, pitching his voice to sound like just another weary worker. Elias jumped, startled, sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead. It's always rough, man. Harding's got it out for me, I swear. Harding, huh, seems like a real gem, Alistair said, feigning ignorance. Long hours here. Elias sighed. Long enough, and the equipment's ancient. That pallet jack nearly took my foot off this morning, said they're waiting on budget. Alistair nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Company seems to be doing well, though, doesn't it? Lots of product moving. Elias shrugged. Yeah, well, none of that trickles down to us, does it? Later, Maria found Elias slumped against a wall during his break, nursing a bruised hand. Harding again, she asked, her voice laced with concern. Elias nodded miserably. He said I was moving too slow, the jack jammed. What do you want me to do? Maria knelt beside him. Look, this isn't right that you're working your butt off, and he's treating you like dirt that we all are. What can we do? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. He's been here forever. They'll believe him over me. Alistair Thorne sent out those employee surveys, remember, and he's been walking around, asking questions. Maybe he actually cares. Maria said. I filled mine out honestly, said we need better equipment, more staff, and Harding needs to be reined in. Elias hesitated, picking at a loose thread on his glove. I don't know, Maria, what if Harding finds out? He'll make my life even worse that I need this job. Maria placed a hand on his arm. I know, Elias, that I understand, but if we don't speak up, nothing will ever change, and honestly, how much worse can it get? She looked at him pointedly. Think about it, maybe this is our chance. The bell signaling the end of the break clanged harshly, punctuating her words. Elias flinched, honest words. So, Elias, tell me about your experience here, Alistair Sterling, feigning his role, inquired, his tone gentle, almost diffident. Elias swiped at the perspiration beading on his forehead, smearing grime across his skin. Harding had been a constant goad all morning, his voice a relentless rasp of demands and criticisms. Figuring he had nothing to lose, Elias spoke his mind. Honestly, sir, it's back-breaking work. No argument there, but the real problem, we're using relics, the dollies are practically arthritic, the forklift wheezes and stalls halfway up the loading dock, a lawsuit waiting to happen, and... He paused, then plunged ahead, and Harding, well, he's no morale booster. He treats us like expendable parts, not people. Alistair, in his guise as Mr. Sterling, tented his fingers, his gaze steady. He saw the veracity etched into Elias's weathered hands and the fervent spark in his expression. He recognized the inherent worth that Harding's relentless badgering hadn't managed to diminish. If you held the reins, Elias, what changes would you implement? Elias's eyes widened, a flicker of astonishment crossing his features. He drew himself up straighter, a nascent hope kindling within. First, updated equipment, safe tools. Second, common courtesy, please, and thank you, cost nothing. People are more productive when they feel valued, not just used up, and maybe. He trailed off, a touch self-conscious. A fairer wage wouldn't go amiss. We're putting in serious effort here. Alistair's nod was measured, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. Elias's words were a salve, validating his suspicions. His company, the one he had built, was fueled by exploited labor and antiquated practices. A wave of mortification washed over him, swiftly followed by a surge of firm resolve. This masquerade had run its course, the genuine restoration needed to commence. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. From the concealment of a towering wall of cardboard, Harding scrutinized the exchange, his face a stony mask of distrust. The words themselves were lost to him, but he noted Elias's emphatic gestures, the intense focus in Mr. Sterling's listening. A vice of apprehension constricted his gut. That upstart Elias, with his loose tongue, was saying far too much. Harding's reign had been built upon intimidation and anxiety, brutal, perhaps, but undeniably effective. He had wrung every last drop of output from his crew, maximizing profits and minimizing expense, and now, this interview, threatened to dismantle everything he had painstakingly constructed. He couldn't allow it. He retrieved his phone, his thumb poised above the dial pad. It was time for a discreet conversation with a certain individual in accounting. A smear campaign against Elias Vargas, a way to undermine his credibility. Was all he required, and a conveniently timed mishap wouldn't hurt either. Harding's lips stretched into a cruel, predatory smile that held no warmth. He refused to let some lowly warehouse hand dismantle his system, framed. The scent of sawdust and stale coffee clung to the air as Elias wrestled another heavy box onto the pallet. His back screamed in protest. Faster, Vargas. Mr. Harding barked from across the warehouse, his voice echoing off the corrugated metal walls. We haven't got all day, some of us actually work for a living. Elias bit back a retort that he needed this job badly. He straightened, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and pushed on. After another grueling hour, the shift was nearing its end. As he headed towards the locker room, Maria Rodriguez caught up to him. Elias, don't let Harding get to you, she said, her voice low and sympathetic. He's always been like this, especially to the new guys. Just keep your head down and do your work. He managed a weak smile. Thanks, Maria. I appreciate it. Little did he know, while they spoke, Harding was already in the locker room, a small, unmarked box clutched in his sweaty hand. He scanned the rows of lockers, his eyes glinting with malice, until he found Elias's. With a quick glance around, he jammed the box inside, careful to conceal it behind Elias's worn jacket. A few minutes later, as Elias was changing, Harding reappeared, flanked by two burly security guards. Vargas, Harding sneered, we need to have a little chat. Elias frowned. About what? About this, Harding said, gesturing to the security guards, who stepped forward. We have reason to believe you've been stealing from the company. Elias stared at him, dumbfounded. Stealing? What are you talking about? I wouldn't steal anything. We'll see about that, Harding said, his voice dripping with false authority. Open your locker, Vargas. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He fumbled with the combination lock, his hands trembling. He swung the door open, revealing his few belongings, a jacket, a lunch bag, and the small, unmarked box. One of the security guards reached in and pulled it out. He opened it, revealing a stack of brand new company-issued smartwatches, still in their packaging. What is this? Elias stammered, his face paling. I've never seen these before, I swear, I don't know how they got there. Harding chuckled, a cruel, triumphant sound. Save it for the police, Vargas. Looks like we caught ourselves a thief. Maria, who had been heading to her locker, stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes wide with shock. She wanted to intervene, to shout that Elias was being framed, but fear held her back. Harding was powerful, and she couldn't afford to lose her job. All she could do was watch helplessly as the security guards led Elias away, his protests echoing in the cavernous room. The air suddenly felt colder, heavier, filled with a sense of injustice that choked her. The revelation. The buzz of the emergency announcement sliced through the afternoon lull. Elias Vargas froze, halfway through wrestling a heavy crate labeled, fragile, handle with extreme care. Mr. Harding, his face perpetually etched with displeasure, materialized beside him, slow as ever. Vargas, what's the matter? Forget how to lift. Elias, knuckles white around the crate, ignored him. The announcement crackled again, the robotic voice declaring, all Omnicorp employees report to the main auditorium immediately. This is not a drill. A ripple of unease spread through the warehouse. Maria Rodriguez, usually radiating sunshine, looked pale and worried as she hurried past. She gave Elias a fleeting, sympathetic glance, but didn't stop. Harding shoved Elias. Get moving, Vargas. Don't want to be late, though I doubt anything exciting will ever happen around here. The auditorium was a sea of bewildered faces. Alastair Thorne, the aloof, impeccably dressed figure they'd all seen flitting through the offices like a ghost, stood on the stage. He looked different, less detached, more present. He tapped the microphone, the sound amplified to a deafening screech. Good afternoon, he began, his voice surprisingly resonant, devoid of its usual clipped formality. I apologize for the abruptness, but there are matters that require immediate attention. Alastair paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. It lingered for a moment on Elias, standing near the back, his work clothes dusty and stained. Then, his eyes locked onto Harding, who stood puffed up with self-importance near the front row. Many of you know me as Mr. Thorne, consultant, Alastair continued, a subtle smile playing on his lips. That was partially true. But what you don't know is that I am also Alastair Thorne, the CEO of Omnicorp. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Elias felt his jaw slacken. CEO, the man who'd given him a bottle of water and a kind word was the CEO? Harding's face morphed from smugness to a grotesque mask of disbelief. Alastair continued, his voice hardening. For too long, this company has been operating under a cloud of mismanagement and, frankly, corruption. Mr. Harding, he said, his voice now laced with steel, your methods have been brought to my attention. He gestured to an assistant who stepped forward, holding a thick file. This file contains irrefutable evidence of embezzlement, intimidation, and gross negligence. Mr. Harding, effective immediately, you are terminated. Harding sputtered, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. You can't do this, I built this department. You built it on the backs of hard-working individuals like Elias Vargas, Alastair retorted, his voice cutting through Harding's bluster, and I intend to rebuild it with integrity and respect. He turned back to the stunned audience, his eyes filled with a newfound passion. Omnicorp is not just a company, it's a community, and I am committed to ensuring that every member of this community is treated with fairness and dignity. There will be changes, necessary changes, but they will be changes for the better. A new beginning. Alastair's voice sliced through the hushed stillness. Elias Vargas, if you please. Elias flinched, a cold dread seizing his gut. The weight of 100 stairs pinned him, each eye in the immense warehouse seemed to pierce him. He shuffled forward, the sound of worn leather against the concrete floor a lonely counterpoint to the roaring in his ears. What transgression was about to be revealed? Was this the end of his employment? Alastair's smile was a sunbeam, chasing away some of the shadows in Elias's mind. Elias, yesterday you showed a remarkable willingness to assist a fellow human being, asking for nothing in return. That inherent decency is a rare commodity. It revealed the kind of man you are, the kind of individual this company desperately needs. A ripple of whispers spread through the assembled workers. Maria, positioned towards the rear, gnawed at her lip, her expression a blend of concern and intense curiosity. Alastair's gaze traveled over the expectant faces. I've spent weeks embedded within Omnicorp, observing the day-to-day reality, and I've identified areas for improvement, the pressures you endure, the lack of adequate support. Let's just say there's ample opportunity to foster a better environment. He stopped, focusing his attention back on Elias, which is why I'm offering you a position. Elias. A newly conceived role, Director of Employee Advocacy. Your mandate will be to cultivate a fair and nurturing workplace for everyone here. You'll possess the authority to shape policies, address grievances, and champion the well-being of our staff. Elias could only gape, disbelief warred with burgeoning hope in a dizzying swirl. Director of Employee Advocacy. It felt like a fantasy that he swallowed, his throat suddenly parched. Sir, I'm at a loss for words. I'm not sure I possess the necessary expertise. Alastair's chuckle was a warm reassurance. Your credentials aren't found in a curriculum vitae, Elias, they reside within your character. I am convinced you are the ideal candidate. The murmur swelled, a rising tide of speculation. Some faces reflected utter astonishment, others blatant skepticism. Maria, however, began to navigate through the throng, a spark of optimism illuminating her features. Elias drew a steadying breath. He recalled his own struggles, the endless hours and the relentless demands. He pictured Maria, and the countless others who deserved far better. Meeting Alastair's gaze, resolve now firming his own, he declared, I accept, sir, with gratitude and a commitment to give my utmost to improve this workplace for everyone. A scattering of applause erupted, swiftly building into a wave of thunderous appreciation. Maria's face was radiant as she clapped with fervor. Later, as the crowd dissipated, Maria approached, her expression a mixture of exhilaration and wonder. Elias, I can't believe it, Director of Employee Advocacy, it's incredible. Do you truly think things might get better around here? Elias's smile, genuine and bright, crinkled the corners of his eyes. I have to believe they will, Maria. It won't be a walk in the park, I'm sure, but I'm committed to ensuring respect and fairness for every single person in this place. He paused, surveying the expansive warehouse, now painted with the amber hues of the setting sun. This marks a fresh start, Maria, for all of us. He inhaled deeply, the familiar odor of cardboard and machinery now tinged with the intoxicating scent of potential change. The fight for a better Omnicorp had commenced.